let's create this sunny side up egg. It might seem challenging, but it's actually really easy. I'm sure you can create this too. In this video, I will be demonstrating my illustration brush set, and it contains some of my favorite brushes. They make creating something like this really easy. So to get started, I have a canvas that is 2300 pixels by 3000 pixels. But you could also go for something like 2500 by 2500 if you want to go for a square concept. But I just like my screen to be entirely filled by canvas. I have created a color palette for you in case you want to use the exact same colors as I'm using. There's a link in the description to download it. First thing we'll do is go to the layer menu and get rid of this little hair. Alright, we'll go to the layer menu, click background color, and we'll pick this color over here. It is a very light blue. And then we'll just go to layer 1 and we'll go to those illustration brushes and use the smooth lines brush. And for the color, we'll pick this one over here, this second color in the color palette. And like it says, smooth lines, it creates very smooth lines. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger. I'll go for 35%. And the first thing we'll create is some toast. And that's like a square shape with rounded corners. So let's just create something like that. Let's make a square shape, but keep those corners rounded. Something like this, and then you can just drag in the color like this to fill the shape. And of course you can adjust it a little bit. You can go over the edges if you want some to be a little bit tidier. If you want to work on those corners, make them more rounded until you have a nice toast shape. Just remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'll go for something like this. Then we will create a new layer. Just go to the layer menu, click the plus for a new layer. And now we will create our heart-shaped sunny side up egg. And we'll use this second color over here to do that. And we'll still be using the smooth lines brush. And this time we won't be making a rounded square, but we will be making a heart shape, of course. We'll go up here. Then make this heart shape like this. And again, doesn't have to be perfect right away. You can just adjust it. Want this to be a little bit bigger, for instance. Let's fill the shape by dragging in the color. And again, you can just add little parts to it. Make this a little bit bigger. Make this a bit more rounded. And if you are having trouble making these smooth lines, you can also just go to the magic wand, then to liquefy, and then use push and a pretty big size. I'll go for, what's it, like 50%, somewhere around that. And then you can just push and pull and change the shape of your egg a little bit. In case you're having trouble getting control over your pen, this is a nice solution. I want this to be a little bit smaller. I'll push it down. I think this is looking good. Of course, a sunny side up egg, it won't look perfect, so this is nice. Let's click the magic wand again to get out of that menu. For this next step, we will create a new layer again. So we'll go to the layer menu, these two little squares, and click the plus. And this time we'll pick this color over here, the second one at the bottom. And we will create the yolk. So we'll just make a circle, hold your pen in place, And then tap one finger on your screen to make it snap to a perfectly round circle. And then just drag in the color to fill that circle. And if you need to move it around, then you can just go to the arrow, to the move tool, and move that circle around until it's at a position that you like. You can also make it smaller, just be sure that you set it to uniform. And then you can use these handles to make it a little bit smaller, for instance. I'll place it here and then I'll just click the arrow to get out of there again. This is already looking like a nice, simplified, stylized sunny side egg on a piece of toast. But we want to add texture and we want to make it look a bit more realistic. And the illustration brush pack is great to add that texture. Let's go to layer 1 and we will click this layer and select Alpha Lock. Now everything is locked. We won't be able to paint outside of this toast shape. So whatever we paint, it will only show up on the toast, which is great. Let's start adding some texture. Now these brushes are great for that. The Spackle It, Rough Spackles, Add Salt, and Grunge Rock. Let's start with Rough Spackles. And let's use this lighter color, this third color in the color palette. And let's just go over this toast for some base texture. Let's check the size. I think that's nice. The size is at 57% and the opacity is at 100%. And now let's just go over and add some subtle texture. Now, I'm not sure if you can see it in the video, but we got some spackles over here. And you can actually use a variety of colors. You can also go for that even lighter color and add a little bit of that as well, just for some base texture. And what we'll do now is we'll switch from that fourth color back to this first color, that dark brown. And we are going to pick the Make It Darker brush. And it does exactly what it says. It makes things darker. But the color you want to make darker, it does have to be on the same layer as you're painting on. So you can't start using this one on a new layer and then try to make it darker. So make sure you try to make things darker on a layer that already has paint. Like this toast layer, we are going to darken up the edges of the toast. Now the opacity of the brush is at, well, let's put it at 100% and let's make it a little bit bigger. We'll go for 18%. And let's go along the edges, giving it a nice toasty edge. Not sure if toasty is a word, but I think it should be. Let's make this nice and dark and crispy. And since we have this layer set to Alpha Lock, we won't be able to paint outside of the edges. So this Make It Darker brush will only be painting on the toast. So just add a nice toasty toast all along the edges. Don't make it too big or too thick. Go for something like this. And then let's also add a little shadow underneath our sunny side up egg, because that egg, it will block some light, casting a shadow on our toast. Let's add a little bit of darker color over here. We're still using that brown. And let's just go along that edge here at the bottom as well. And let's add a little bit of shadow here. That's looking great. Next, we'll add some lines to our toast. We'll make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's go for 13%. And let's pick up a local color. You can do that by just clicking that, well, dropping your finger on the screen, holding it. You can pick up a local color. or you can use this little rounded square to get that eyedropper tool and to pick a local color. And now we are going to make some lines, starting at the top, going to the bottom, and make sure that you have like a similar spacing between each line, because that's of course where the metal has heated this toast. Just make some of these vertical lines. One more over here. That's looking nice and crunchy. I just want to add a little bit more texture to our toast. I'll pick up that local dark brown color. And then I'll go back to the rough spackles brush. I just want a little bit more texture. So let's go over it one more time, adding a few rough spackles. Well, that was a bit too much. You can just use 2 fingers on your screen to undo if it's getting too much. You want to keep it a little bit subtle. I think this is looking good. Now let's move to the egg. Let's go to layer 2. Let's set that to alpha lock as well. We'll just click it and select alpha lock to be sure that we won't be painting outside of this heart shape. And the first thing we'll do is grab the Grunge Rock brush. And for the color, we will go to this first color in the color palette. And let's go over the edges. Now let me just check the size and the opacity. We have it at 40% opacity and the size is at 30%. And we'll darken this edge a little bit. And at the same time, we're giving it some texture. Adding to the realism of this egg. Here I won't go over the edge, but I'll go just a little bit to the left of it, giving it a more dynamic shape. And let's also darken this edge a little bit. It's like a little bit of a cast shadow of that yolk. Next, let's pick that lighter color. That's this third color in the color palette. And let's add some light touches as well. We'll add some light touches here to the right side of that darker edge. These are like some subtle highlights on the egg. We'll lighten up this part a little bit, just around that yolk. And here, this edge. You can lighten up that as well. Now we can add some touches to it by going to the Make It Darker brush and picking a local color. Let me just pick up this color over here and let's just darken it slightly in some places, like this shadow here. I'll make that a little bit darker. And we can darken up some of these edges over here. It's a little bit burned. Not too much, so it's still tasty. And just add a few darker spots. For the next step, we'll go to the yolk. Let's go to layer 3, and again, let's use alpha lock. Let's click that layer and select alpha lock so we won't be painting outside of the shape. Let's go to the Grunge Rock brush again. And let's first pick this darker orange, that first color here at the bottom. And let's just drop in some texture here. Just drop it in like that. And then switch to that lighter yellow to add some lighter parts as well. I want a variation of dark and light texture. Now I'll go back to the Make It Darker brush. Yes, it's one of my favorite brushes. And let's pick that orange over here again. And let's darken this edge a little bit. We got a slight shadow there. Let's just darken it up like this. And on this side as well, just a little bit. Just go over the edge. And now let's add a nice highlight to our yolk. That will really make it look more realistic. Let's click the plus for a new layer. And for the brush, let's go to the Smooth Lines brush. And for the color, let's just pick this one over here, a very light yellow. And let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's go for 13%. And let's draw a highlight in a shape like this. It's like a weird stretched, bended rectangle. Drop in a color like this. And let's make another one over here. It's like a slice of pineapple, little slice of pineapple. And if you need to refine it, you can actually use the eraser. And if you want to use the eraser set to this brush, you can just click and hold the eraser to make it switch to the smooth lines. And then you can clean up these edges. And if you hold your pen in place, you get this nice straight line for your eraser. So you can nicely clean up these edges of the reflections, the highlights. Next thing we'll do is add a layer mask to this reflection. We'll go to the layer menu, click this layer and then select mask. What you can do with a mask is mask parts of a layer. When the layer mask is white, it doesn't mask anything. And when it's black, it'll mask everything. So if you have a white layer mask and you paint on it with black, you can mask parts of the layer. If you paint on it with 100% black, it'll block things, block parts entirely. But you can also paint with gray or with a black brush with a lower opacity to make things more transparent. And that's what we're going to do here. We are going to go to the airbrushing brushes and use the soft brush, set to black, and the opacity is set to, well, let's go lower. Let's go for 50%. And the brush size is set to 5%. So this is a transparent brush set to black, which will lead to a gray, meaning that it will block parts just a little bit. So you can go over these areas and just slightly block parts, making this reflection more subtle. Now I'd like to go back to the yolk layer, that's layer 3, and let's go back to the illustration brush set. And now I would like to use the Make It Lighter brush, and I'll set it to this orange over here. The opacity is set to 95%. And the size is at 4%. And let me add a little bit of light on the yolk here. We'll follow that shadow area, making like a semicircle. And let's grab an even lighter color for this right side. Let's just pick up this local light color. And let's add some more highlights on this side. Some little extra touches. Just make sure that you follow that rounded shape of the yolk. Don't start making very straight lines, like really straight reflections and highlights. That will look weird. Follow that rounded shape. Can add a little bit more here. A little bit more light. I think this is already looking really nice and tasty, but we can add more. Let's go to the layer with, well, the heart shape on it, and let's add a layer mask to this layer as well. Let's click it, then click mask, and this time for our brush, we will go to the dry fine liner. It's a nice textured brush. We have the brush set to black. The opacity is at 100% and the size is at 16%. And we will go along the edges of that heart shape and add a little bit of texture to it and some little holes. Because when you bake an egg like this, that edge, it won't look like this perfect smooth line, smooth edge. It'll have this textured edge. And you can have some of these holes in there. Just make it look less perfect. That's what we're aiming for. So some holes over here. So you'll see that shadow on the toast. You will see that through those holes. This will really add to that realism of this sunny side up egg. Just go all along the edge and don't go overboard. Don't mess up everything. Just in some areas, rough it up a little bit. Just to make it look imperfect. Let's mess up this edge a little bit. You can also just go along that edge a little bit just to add some texture there. Every once in a while you can make a little hole. I think this is looking good. Just one more thing. I want to add a drop shadow underneath our toast. And since the drop shadow, it will have the shape of the toast, let's use that shape. Let's go to that toast layer. Let's click it and then click select. Now we have a selection in the shape of our toast. Now let's create a new layer by clicking the plus and we'll drop it underneath the toast. And now let's pick a color. Let's pick this gray color over here and we can drop it onto our canvas. And since we have a selection active, the paint will only show up inside of the selection. So if you drop it in, you won't be able to see it because the toast is in front of it. Let's click the S-shaped ribbon to turn off the selection. Now when you turn off the toast here, you can see that we have a nice gray toast shape. That will be our shadow. Of course, it really doesn't look like a shadow yet. We need to shift it to make it look like a shadow. So while I have this new layer selected here, it's layer 7. Let's go to the move tool, that's the arrow, and let's drag this layer up and to the left just a little bit. You can go for something like this. You can always move it more later if it's needed. Then click the arrow again and then go to the magic wand, click Gaussian blur, and then layer. And we'll slide to the right and blur this layer. I am going for, what shall I do? Let's go for 11.5% and then click the magic wand again. And there it is, a super easy sunny side up egg on a piece of toast. I hope you have enjoyed following this tutorial and I'm looking forward to seeing your sunny sides up. Or is it sunny side ups? I don't know. Looking forward to seeing you next time.